Welcome to the KO Boxing Show. Haven't we got a massive show tonight? One of the leading promoters in the world, none other than the great Lou DiBella, all the way from Los Angeles. Welcome to the KO Boxing Show, my friend.
Good to be with you, Peter.
Lou, let's go over your career. I mean, you're a former HBO executive. It doesn't get bigger than that. You promoted Deontay Wilder, you promoted Sergio Martinez, Jermaine Taylor, Bernard Hopkins, Paulie Malignaggi. So you've been, you've been in the game all your life. You've been in the Rocky movies. I thought you acted quite well, even though you played yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what's it like now promoting George Kambosos and Devin Haney? It must be a big buzz for you. Have you been to Australia?
Oh, I have been to Australia. I love Melbourne, and actually, I haven't been to Melbourne since I was in. I was basically in my 20s, early 30s, so it's a long time. But Melbourne's one of those places I remembered because I loved it so much. I mean, all the culture, all the beautiful scenery, the great food. I'm really looking forward to going to Melbourne, not only for the boxing match, but just to visit and enjoy it again. Kambosos, at this point in my career, I've been doing this now for over 30 years, Peter. I got into boxing in my 20s. I now tipped over that 60 mark, and I'm getting inducted into the Hall of Fame a week after the fight between Kambosos and Haney. So I'm sort of in that I don't want to say later stages of my career, but I don't want to do this when I'm 90 like King or Arum. So I'm not going to be doing this forever. But to be able to have a young champion like Kambosos, a kid this super confident, who came out of nowhere to prove to the world, he and his dad knew. I knew he was good. That's why I signed him. Peter Kahn knew he was good. That's why he brought him to me. But he wasn't having an easy time. He wasn't getting chased about by promoters. But he and his dad said from the beginning that they were going to be champions. George said from the beginning that he was going to be the best guy at lightweight in the world. And now people are starting to take him very seriously because he's already proven against Teofimo Lopez what he's capable of. And now he's getting that opportunity again at home against a great fighter, a very, skilled, slick boxing young kid, Devin Haney, who also doesn't know how to lose. And honestly, I want to give some credit to Haney because he's showed a lot of grit and willingness to roll with the punches and do what was necessary to make this fight happen. And now he's faced with the possibility of having the fight without the dad live in his corner, and he's still in Australia now, getting ready to fight. And I know that George is ready for this fight. I think Haney's going to be ready for this fight. I think it's going to be a sensational match in the ring. But if anyone bets against George Kambosos, I think they're foolish.
First of all, congratulations on being inducted in the Boxing Hall of Fame. Well done, Lou, well deserved. Let's go into this fight with George Kambosos. I mean, he's got a great story. His father, Jimmy's a fantastic person. I'm Greek-Australian as well, or Australian-Greek, whichever way you want to put it. And I've known George from, way back before he became this famous world-class athlete warrior. So I've got a good connection with the family. I was actually in the gym to see Devin Haney train. I had a boxer spar one of his other stablemates. So I did see him spar, and I did see him move around. He's a world-class athlete, but the factor that I don't think people are going to take into consideration is there's going to be 55,000 people there. There'll be 30,000 Greeks. The adrenaline's going to be going through the roof.
It's going to be going through the roof, and it's going to be the most pro-George environment he's ever fought in. People have to remember that he took a very hard road to the top. We didn't get any favors. I didn't give him any favors because I didn't get any favors for him. He had to travel the world. He had to fight on undercards. He fought in different countries. He fought for not a lot of money. He had to earn his opportunity to fight Teofimo Lopez by becoming a mandatory, because no one was gonna give him that big fight unless he forced it. And he forced it with his win in England on hostile territory against Lee Selby. Everything that's ever been asked of George, he's risen to that occasion. And I've worked with some of the most confident and talented fighters in the world, and one I'll point to specifically in terms of just ungodly talent level and self-confidence was Sergio Martinez. Yeah. and even Sergio taken into account, I've never worked with someone that has the overwhelming belief in himself. Deontay Wilder always thought that he could envision his victories, and he could believe it, receive it, kind of thing. But George has that mentality, and he doesn't even have to talk about it. It's just, it pours out of him. He doesn't believe at his best anyone can beat him. He works nonstop. His work ethic is incredible. If you know him and you watch him work, it's impossible not to admire what he's done and not to believe in what he's capable of doing. And honestly, if he beats Devin Haney, he's got to be considered for a top 10 pound for pound in the world. And I think if he beats Devin Haney, he becomes the biggest Australian fighter in my memory. Awesome. Jeff Fennick had a tremendous career, was a big star. Costa was a star. There are other stars who have up and coming stars now, like Tim Tszyu. But George wins this fight. There's nobody in the Australian continent in boxing bigger than George Kambosos. And if he wins, and I think if he wins this fight, Peter, he can take claim to being a top 10 pound for pound fighter.
Wow, that's a big statement. I mean, and high stakes here. When will you be arriving into Australia, and what's the build-up been like, in your opinion, the magnitude of this fight on a world level? How big is it compared to other events that you've promoted?
Anytime you're going to put well over 40,000 people into a stadium, it's very few fighters that can do over 40,000 people anywhere in the world. In the United States, you have Canelo Alvarez has done it. There are very few fighters that have done it. It takes an incredibly big fight to get into that 40, 50, 55,000 range. And then to have a country embracing their hometown star who's never really fought there. I mean, look, we talk about, I'd like to do 55,000. I'd like to be the biggest fight ever in Australian boxing history. But even if we do 45,000 and we're the second biggest, George has basically not fought in Australia in forever. He hasn't fought in front of 4,500 people. Forget about 45,000 people.
Yeah. So
already, where his star power is skyrocketing, and the Australian fans are embracing him and supporting him. This is a huge event. It's an event of worldwide magnitude. When you go online and you scour social media, people are talking about this fight all over the boxing world, all over the globe. And it's a fight that's going to be sold into the entire international boxing scene. And it'll be televised by Sky in the UK, and it'll be televised by ESPN in the United States and Canada. It'll be live in Italy. It'll be all over the world, all over Europe. It's a huge event, and it's a privilege to be associated with that kind of event. It doesn't happen a lot. And by the way, only one other time in my career have I ever promoted an event that will have a similar live gate, and that's when Sergio Martinez fought as champion in a soccer stadium in Argentina against Martin Murray, actually in a monsoon, and there were still 50,000 people there. Wow. And this is going to be that same kind of energized, crazy environment with George getting the love of the Melbourne sports scene and the Greek community in Melbourne. Devin's going to have to really have his head together and be super prepared to be able to compete in that kind of an environment.
What's your prediction on the fight, Lou?
I think it's going to be a sensational fight. I think George is going to win, but I don't think it's going to be non-competitive. I don't think George is going to roll over Haney. I think Haney is too skilled to be rolled over. I expect George to win a contested decision, but probably pull away later in the fight. I think Devin is an incredibly skilled boxer, and his movement is great. I think that he's going to. I'd be surprised if Devin didn't win some rounds in the fight, because he's that good of a technical boxer. But George's pressure, George's rate of activity, and George has more power. The one thing, if you're going to look at Devin's game, one area where he's not particularly known for is his power punching. So I think that's an area that George has an advantage. And then George has that advantage of 50,000 people lifting him up, you know, during the biggest fight of his career. So I favor George. I believe in George. George believes in himself. I'm never picking against George again. Honestly, as long as he keeps believing in himself and preparing the way he is. I expect him to win, but I do think this is a very difficult fight. And I think this is an incredibly interesting match of styles. You know, the fighter styles are somewhat different. You know, Devin is technically very, very sound. His ring movement is tremendously skilled, and good defense, and good jab. He's got the whole package.
Yeah.
I don't think he has the tenacity, the work rate, or the punching power of George. So, if the people listening are wondering how I would bet it if I was, I don't bet fights I'm involved in, by the way, but if people are wondering how I would bet it, I would bet George by either a late stoppage or a decision win.
Now, awesome. Luke, 2 questions before we sign you off. Who's the best pound for pound fighter you have ever seen fight live?
It's a great question. I seen fight live. See, I saw Ray Leonard fight live, and Duran fight live, and Hearns fight live.
Wow.
I've seen them all fight live. I've seen so many great fighters fight live, but the majority of them, those huge names, those 4 kings, Hagler, Hearns, Leonard, Duran, I didn't see them fight live until they were well past their prime.
Yeah.
So I would have to say that the greatest fighter that I've ever seen fight live, it might be fair to say Floyd Mayweather.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Luke. And before we sign,
by the way, it's interesting. I don't put Floyd in the top. I don't think Floyd is the best ever. I mean, Floyd thinks he's the best ever, and he's one of the best ever. But I don't put him in number 1. I think he's in. He's securely in the top 10 of all time. But I wouldn't put him number 1. But I actually think that he's somewhat underrated by a lot of boxers. And I think it's, but Floyd understood that it is the sweet science. And if you don't need to get hit, why do you want to? And, I think some people resent the fact or fault him for the fact that he wasn't in a lot of wars, that he wasn't in these memorable give and take battles. That's because he was that good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I put him in, like, I don't put him necessarily, I don't put him above those other names I gave you, like Ray and all-time pound for pound list, but I didn't see them when they were at the top of their game. And I saw Floyd at the top of his game. And Floyd at the top of his game is simply a sensational, sensational. Yeah.
What do you think of Tim Tszyu? Do you think he can win a world title?
I think he can. I think he's a very, very talented kid. Do I think he beats Charlo at 154? No.
Okay. Fair
now,
enough.
that doesn't win a world title.
Yeah.
That just means I don't think he's ready for Charlo right now at 154. That performance Charlo just put on with Castano was a superb boxing. And he's a strong kid capable of a knockout Charlo at any time of the fight. And right now, I think he's the gold standard at 154. I'm not saying Tim could never beat him, but I wouldn't run to make that fight right now. I don't think Tim's ready for that kind of fight right now. Yeah. And I think Charlo's the man at 154. And actually, with that last win, Charlo moved into my personal top 10 pound for pound today. So, I think Charlo is one of the best fighters in the world right now. I think Tim is a very skilled young fighter, but I think there's a ways to go before he's at his peak. And I wouldn't say he's ready for Charlo yet. Are there guys he could beat at 154 in the right situation? Well, Charlo's undisputed right now. So do I think he's beating him? No. But if things change in the division, eventually Tim Tszyu has the skill to win a world title.
Yeah,
right.
It could be a vacant title. Charlo might not want to one of the titles, and it becomes vacant. He fights off.
Right. But at the moment, with all the belts in Charlo's hands, I think that would be a big mountain for Tim to climb.
Yeah. Before we sign the interview off, Lou, what's the funniest story in boxing? Obviously, you're a character and we've all been in stories. What are some of the craziest stories that you can tell us without obviously going overboard? What's the funniest one that you can remember?
I mean, I got to tell you, I eventually I'm going to write a book because there's so many crazy.
What's your best one? Give us your best story.
I don't know. I have so many, and some of them, since I'm sure there's going to be kids and women and listening to this, you're not going to get necessarily all my stories. But let me think of one that I could tell you.
Is there a funny one? Can you give us a funny one that might have happened?
You're putting me on the spot. Let me think of this for a second. A funny story,
or if just a story that comes off the top of your head, like with a character, something that was like funny and odd in boxing, and there always is.
Well, boxing is, truth is stranger than fiction in boxing. So like you see everything, from the most insane to the funny to the most upsetting, to the greatest, upsets in any sport. Boxing is high theater. Like there's so much funny stuff. I when I go back to being a young guy in the 1990s and being at HBO, working with guys like King and Aram back then when they were in their prime. I've seen a lot of funny things. I've watched Don King and Bob Aram dancing at 70 years old on tabletops in Memphis, Tennessee to a blues band. Where I've seen crazy stuff. I've watched. I've seen some of the most vicious arguments between guys that an hour later went out and got drunk together. You see, all is possible and everything happens in our sport. And I think that what differentiates boxing from other sports is that boxing's like mano a mano or woman against woman. Anything can happen. Yeah. Intangibles often take the night. It's not about necessarily who's the greatest athlete. It's you never could know what to expect, in boxing. You just don't. It's the theater of the unpredictable, right? Yeah. I'm actually gonna come back and I'm gonna do another. When I get to Australia, we're gonna do this again, and I'm gonna come in with one of my funny stories because I don't want to pick something out right now. And the ones that are coming to mind right now aren't clean enough to tell.
No, we don't want any. No, we don't want. Yeah. We want the clean ones. No, but yeah, thank you for you.
I'm going to come back with a couple of funny ones that are clean. Look, I can tell you that one of the funny things that happened when I was at HBO is that when I was at HBO, we'd stopped doing business with King for a while, and Don brought Mike Tyson from HBO to Showtime, and a couple of years into, Don was exclusively providing fights to Showtime. Yeah. He called me and he asked if he could come to my office. He wanted to sit down and talk. I had forgotten that I had a full, life-size mugshot of Don from when he was a young man and was
incarcerated.
I'd forgotten that the mugshot was on my door, and King came into the meeting. I was on the phone inside my office. The door was closed, and he's standing there staring at a giant mugshot. Yeah, he came into my office. Needless to say, he wasn't pleased. Though after a couple of minutes of berating me for being so insensitive and showing so much hate toward him, he started laughing and he looked at me and he said, "I was a good-looking young buck, though, wasn't I?" And,
no, that's.
But Don was a force of nature, one of the great promoters of all time, and whatever I'm not sitting there making judgments about ethics and morals or whatever, but Don King was like the P.T. Barnum, of boxing. Don could promote anything. Yeah. He could pull two guys off a bench and turn it into a big event. Yeah. And in his prime, Don was a bigger celebrity than almost all the fighters who fought for him. Yeah. So there were a lot of and guys like it's a sport. The one thing I'll say is this, Peter: there were more characters in the sport in my early days of the sport than they are now.
Yeah,
it's become more of a cold-blooded business, and it's also become a business in which promoters don't work with each other collaboratively as well as they did 20 and 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, there's everyone has their little sort of universe. In the States, particularly, their exclusive contracts. ESPN's exclusive to Bob Arum, and PBC and Al Heyman are basically Showtime and Fox, and Eddie Hearn, sort of controls the zone. And there are these separate avenues, and too often, fighters don't cross the street. So a lot of the big fights get delayed. A lot of the big fights don't happen. You know, it's one of the reasons why fans should be flocking to Marvel Stadium from around Australia, because not only is George coming home as this homecoming hero, it's really one of the best fights you can make in the sport. It's undisputed. It's for to create one light heavyweight champion, one man with all the belts. Nobody can argue as to who the man is at 135 after this fight.
Yeah.
It's a fight that Devin Haney did cross the street to make. You know, Devin Haney did what it took to get this fight done. And George gave him this opportunity. And by the way, George fought Teofimo Lopez, then contracted to fight one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world in Lomachenko. And then due to that horrible war in the Ukraine, Loma is still in the Ukraine. And then he veered off course from Lomachenko to the most difficult fight available to him in Devin Haney. That's a sign of a great champion. Like when you go,
the
Spartan warrior.
Yeah.
It is Spartan blood. It is the Spartan blood. It is the Spartan warrior. There's a lot of Leonidas in him. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't give a single about risk. He doesn't care. He wants to fight the best. He believes in himself. I know how proud the Greek Australia community is of him, and I think all of Australia should be proud of him.
Yeah, we are. We're proud of him. And Lewin, you know what? In the old Greek terminology, they used to say, "Fortune favors the brave."
I could tell you this about this kid, and I mean this. I haven't come across a braver one.
Yeah,
I haven't. I can't say that I've ever promoted a fighter that has this kid's self-belief.
Ontario gated with boxing skills.
Yeah, and he has the skills, and he's
got the skills. People don't understand. He's got great skills.
He's got great skills, but here's the other thing people are underestimating. He's getting better every single fight. He just works. He works harder and harder. He learns. He's an incredibly quick study himself. I mean, yeah, he's got a solid corner. He's got a terrific trainer. Javier is a terrific trainer. He's got a great teacher and he's got a great corner. But he's a great student and he's a perceptive kid. And you could see him coming out of fights, learning from mistakes he made. You could see him coming out of the fights, learning from some good things his opponent might have done in the fight. And he pulls that stuff all in. And from fight to fight to fight, he's one of the most rapidly advancing and improving champions I've ever seen. And combine that with an incredible will and an incredible belief in himself. George Kambosos, is going to be a problem for
He's a real deal. He's a real deal.
He's a real deal. And now, in front of 50,000 people at Marvel Stadium in Melbourne, on home soil, he's going to get the chance to show the whole world again that he's the real deal. And I hope to see everybody in Marvel Stadium. I'm getting on a plane in about 48 hours, so I'll be there in the next few days. I'll be there by Friday, your time. And I look forward to spending a little bit of time there. And I look forward to meeting a lot of the Australian boxing fans. Look at the time this is for Australian boxing right now, too. A lot of talent. Tim is talented. Justice is talented.
Yeah,
Jay Apateo is talented. You have a lot of young emerging talent. You have, and then nearby in New Zealand, you have guys like Junior Fa and Hemi Ahio that are on the undercard. David Nika. Like, there's a lot of talent on the continent of Australia, on your continent in this area right now, and it's a great time, for your part of the world in boxing. And right now, George is the emperor, and let's see if I think he's going to hold that status. And I know that I'm going to be joined by a lot of Greeks and Australians and rooting for him to hold that status.
I was going to say, Lou, thank you for your time. Congratulations on being inducted in the Hall of Fame. And I think come Sunday, June the 5th, we might see a 62-year-old man dancing on Greek tables if George Kambosos wins. We might get you on the Uzo and get you out in some of those Greek nightclubs.
Let me tell you something. I promise you, I'll join you in some Greek nightclubs after. if we win on the 5th, when we win on the 5th, I will absolutely be watching that Uzo turn white, or is it more yellow returns before the rice?
Yeah.
Right. Or why believe me, I will be drinking some Uzo and dancing on tables on June 5th.
We'll keep the word that. Thank you, Lou, my friend, and we'll see you in Australia. Thank you for your time. God bless, and we'll see you soon, my friend.
Thanks for being so patient, because I had to reschedule you a few times, but thank you for being so patient with me.
You're
Peter, good to see you. I look forward to seeing you in person when I get there this week.
Thanks, Lou. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.